The Dragonback Series by Timothy Zahn. Book 6, Dragon and Liberator. Chapter 31. That's it, Allison announced, dropping one last folded shirt into the carry bag laid out on her bunk in the SNA's second cabin. You know, I'm really going to miss this place. Not that you ever spent much time in here, Jack pointed out. Oh, I don't mean the room, she said, looking around the cabin. Not even the ship, really. The company, then? Dracos asked from the corner where he and Tanim had stretched out on the deck to watch Allison's packing. Yes, Allison said. She gave Jack a wry look. Strange though that may sound. That's okay. It's been a day for strangeness, Jack assured her. Oddly enough, he thought, he was going to miss her too. You're really Mr. Braxton's granddaughter? She nodded. On my mother's side, she said. My dad, on the other hand, is an Internos intelligence agent. Must have made for an interesting childhood, Jack said. So you're an Internos agent, and I thought the Wynyard's Edge recruited them young. A shadow seemed to pass across Allison's face. I'm a special case, she said quietly. Do you remember after you got back from Semaline when you asked if I knew what it felt like to have people die because of me? Yes, Jack said, wincing at the memory of that day. He'd been full of anger and pain and guilt and had lashed out completely unfairly at her. I was 9 at the time, Allison went on, her eyes staring into infinity. My best friend's brother told me in secret that he was going to run away from home and join a mercenary group. How old was he? Dracos asked. He'd just turned 12, Allison said. 2 years too young to legally join, but he was tall for his age and he really wanted to go. She closed her eyes briefly. 3 months later, he was dead, killed in combat. I'm sorry, Jack said quietly. But it was his decision, not yours. What happened wasn't your fault. Yes, it was, Allison said. Her voice was calm, but Jack could hear old pain still lurking beneath it. I could have told someone. I should have told someone. But I thought the whole thing was terribly grown up and too glamorous for words. Jack nodded as he suddenly understood. So that's what you were doing in the Wynyard's Edge. You were looking for evidence of underage recruitment. She gave him a wry half smile. You are pretty good at this, aren't you? Yes, that was my mission in life. I'd already infiltrated Webner's Hellions and the Malison Ring and pulled data on them. This time is the Wynyard's Edge turn. The whole thing your dad's idea, I suppose? Actually, Dad was dead set against it, she said, her smile vanishing into memory again. As were Mom, Grandfather, Grandmother, and pretty much everyone else. But I had righteousness on my side. And guilt. And you wore them down. More or less, Allison said. Dad finally agreed on the condition that I go through a full 5 years of training first. He probably figured I'd get tired of it and drop out. Only you didn't, Jack said. Like I said, righteousness and guilt. She cocked her head. And then I met you, and a whole lot of really interesting questions came tumbling out into the light. After we escaped from Sunrise, I contacted Dad. We put 2 and 2 together and figured out that you were the same Jack who'd saved Grandfather's life on the Star of Wonder. After a little discussion, we agreed I should change missions and concentrate on you for a while. She snapped her fingers. Which reminds me, I've got the footlocker you left at the Wynyard's Edge camp. With my leather jacket inside? Jack asked. Great! I thought that was gone forever. No, Dad's got it, all safe and sound, Allison assured him. We'll pick it up after we get out of here. Anyway, we lost you for a bit while you were on Brummagem, then picked up your trail again after you freed all those Chukuk slaves. I followed you to Bigelow, where you promptly got yourself captured trying to sneak into the Malison Ring HQ there. Which Dracos and I could have gotten out of on our own, Jack said, his face warming at the memory. So that was why I spotted Harper hanging around your ship. He was your excuse to talk me into giving you a ride? Yes. Allison lowered her eyes. He was also. Bodyguards aren't supposed to be your friends, you know. But he was anyway. Sometimes it's a bodyguard's duty to die for those he protects, Draco said. Just as it is a warrior's. I know, Allison said. And we'd probably all be dead if he hadn't sacrificed himself to set off the Advocatus Diaboli's emergency beacon that way. But it still hurts. He wouldn't want you to hold on to the pain, Allison, Draco said gently. But you may always honor him in your memory, as I will. As we all will, Jack promised, searching for a way to get Allison off this subject. So that whole thing about meeting friends on Roast Grovey was just a bucket of soap bubbles? Allison's eyes and mine seemed to come back. Basically, she said, though someone would have come eventually to check if I hadn't surfaced. Grandfather's scientist had analyzed the scratch mark Dracos made on the bottom of the rejuvenation cylinder, and they'd somehow deduced that it was a puka claw mark. So I maneuvered you into going there just to see how you'd react. She smiled at Tanine. Little did I know. Anyway, once we got off planet again, I called my contact on your interworld transmitter. I told him about the pukas and had Dad go in with a team and spirit them away. I didn't want Neverland killing them, or worse, using them to scan the refugee fleet when it arrived. Jack looked over at the computer module. Uncle Verge was being awfully quiet about all this. How did you bribe Uncle Verge into not telling me about the call? No bribery needed, Allison said. I'd already figured the SNA was either a diplomatic or governmental ship, and their computers always come with a privacy lockout. I just said the magic words and Uncle Verge basically went to sleep. Jack nodded. Is that also how Harper got you on Bentry, Uncle Verge? Yes, Uncle Verge said, a strangely thoughtful tone to his voice. Yeah, he shut me off, got out of his cuffs, unwired the Sopor mished canisters you'd hooked up, flourished to the Braxton Universe's office on Keelywine, and dropped Chiggers off with the security people there, Then he woke me up again, explained the situation, and gave me a take it or leave it offer to help out, And, yeah, that's pretty much what happened. And so the two of you came to Point 2 to masquerade as Uncle Virgil and infiltrate Neverland's group, Jack said, shaking his head. There was nothing like suddenly getting an entirely new angle on a situation you'd thought you understood. And to bring me some emergency equipment, Allison said. He was also there on Brumadum, by the way, the night I locked myself in Neverland's safe. I remember, Jack said, an odd memory suddenly kicking in. When Frost and Neverland came charging into the hangar, you said both of us weren't supposed to rescue you. Right, Allison said. I'd given him a comm clip with your frequency and pattern so we could keep track of what we were up to. She grimaced. Of course, if I'd realized that Frost and Neverland were still on Brumadum, I'd have called in a full Braxton security force to grab them as they left the Chakuk estate. We could have ended the whole plot right there. That wouldn't have ended it, Draco said. The Valaga and their death weapons were still free. Even without Neverland and Frost, they would have found a way to attack the refugee fleet. I suppose, Allison said reluctantly. Anyway, you know the rest.
I'll accept your story about being General Davy's daughter,
Tanim spoke up.
How did you create that fiction?
It's no trick for intelligence people to create false IDs, Jack explained. Her dad probably also gave her all those voice prints Uncle Verge told me she had stashed away in case she needed them. Jack's right, Allison said. But in this case, we also had General Davy himself ready to back up my story if Neverland decided to check up on me. After I called his forces in on the Patry Chakuk last month, Dad had to tell him the whole story to keep him from launching a full investigation and maybe knocking over my personal apple cart in the process. I'll bet he was thrilled, Jack murmured. He was several miles north of Furious, Allison agreed. Not at us, but at what Frost had done with his men and equipment. He agreed on the spot to cooperate with us. Hence the Malison Ring contingent your grandfather brought in with him, Jack said dryly. Probably the main reason Frost switched sides there at the end. He knew he'd lost and figured he'd better surrender to your grandfather before Davy got to him. Something like that. Allison shook her head. I just wish we could have persuaded the Patrichikuk to cooperate too. But he wouldn't. All Dad could do at that point was block his communication so he couldn't bring the hammer down on Harper.
Though Neverland still guessed the truth,
Tanim said. Allison sighed. Yes. So why didn't you just tell me from the start who you were? Jack asked. It would have made things a lot easier. Allison shrugged uncomfortably. In the beginning, because we weren't sure whether we could trust you, she said. You or Dracos. Oh, that's nice, Jack growled.
No, she's right, Jack, Dracos said. She had only my side of the story after all. There was no way for her to know we weren't a group of invaders planning a conquest of the Orion Arm.
At least not until I got to know him, Allison agreed. By then, she grimaced. You'd gotten it into your head that grandfather might have been involved with your parents' death. At that point, I didn't dare tell you the truth.
you don't still think that, do you, Jack?
Tanim asked. Not really, Jack assured her. Besides, if Allison can accept the whole Kadar race based on Dracos' character, I suppose I can accept Mr. Braxton based on hers.
Which makes him a good man,
Tanim suggested. It certainly makes him a conniving man, Jack said blandly. Also smart-mouthed, underhanded. Hey! Allison protested. But probably not a murderer, Jack finished. He turned innocent eyes on Allison. You say something? Listen, buddy boy, she said, leveling a finger at him. If you want to talk about conniving...
please.
Tanim interrupted anxiously.
Please don't fight.
They're not fighting,
Draco soothed her.
This is a rather silly game humans sometimes like to play together.
You'll get used to it, Allison assured her, sending Jack's innocent look right back at him. Jack felt his stomach tighten. Yeah, he muttered. What? You don't think she will? Allison asked, frowning. I don't think she'll have a chance, Jack told her. As soon as... He broke off at the sound of a footstep down the corridor. Hello? He called.
It's just me.
Braxton's voice came back.
Where are you?
Second cabin, Allison called back. Down the corridor aft. There were more footsteps, and Braxton appeared in the cabin doorway.
There you are,
he said, crossing over to the bunk and sitting down.
You ready, Allison?
Almost, Allison said. Is the battle over?
Actually, the battle never got started,
Braxton said, looking thoughtfully around the room.
We were able to get through to the Brumgas on the Foxwolf.
He looked at Dracos.
Excuse me, the gatekeeper,
he corrected himself.
They decided there was no sense in throwing their lives away and mutinied against the Valaga.
Lucky for them, Allison said.
Not for all of them,
Braxton said soberly.
The Valaga turned the death weapons around and killed over 100 before they were finally overwhelmed.
The room went quiet. Jack glanced at Dracos, seeing his own revulsion and regret in the Kadah's expression. Even big, dumb lummoxes like the Brumgas didn't deserve to die that way. Rotten losers, aren't they? He murmured.
Yes,
Dracos said, his voice dark.
They are!
Well, they'd better get used to it, Allison said. Now that you're back where you belong, they're done for.
Yes,
Braxton agreed. He finished his survey of the room and turned to Jack.
Speaking of being back where they belong, Jack, you and I need to discuss your future.
What future? Jack said sourly. Now that everyone knows Uncle Virgil's dead, some Internos bureaucrat's bound to take the SNA away from me. Then they'll put me in school or with some strangers. He broke off. Sorry, he apologized. I suppose I should just be happy I'm still alive.
Yes, you should,
Braxton said.
but I think we can do a little better than your rather unappetizing scenario.
He gestured to Dracos.
You see, as it happens, Braxton Universus still owns Iota Clestes.
Jack eyed him suspiciously. And?
Oh, don't worry,
Braxton hastened to assure him.
The Kada and Shantine are welcome to it for as long as they want to stay. But instead of giving it to them outright, I thought I'd give them a permanent lease at $1 a year.
Why is that better than selling it to them? Jack asked. Or just giving it to them, Allison added pointedly.
A mere $1 a year fee is giving it to us,
Dracos told her.
May I speak?
Braxton asked.
Thank you. There are two reasons to lease instead of sell. One, those Internos bureaucrats Jack just mentioned also have their own ideas as to what should be done with refugees and displaced persons. If I still own Iota Clestes, I can let anyone move in there that I want.
Giving the Kada and Shantine time to negotiate their way through the paperwork? Allison suggested.
Exactly,
Braxton said.
And two, since I own the world, I can hire anyone I want to be ambassador to the residents.
Ambassador?
Dracos asked.
Technically, he'll be a corporate liaison,
Braxton said.
But the duties will be effectively the same. Naturally, I'll need someone who knows and understands the Kada.
He looked at Jack.
Ideally, one who is already known and trusted by them.
Jack frowned, and then suddenly he understood. You can't be serious, he said.
I certainly can,
Braxton said.
My planet, remember?
He looked around the room again.
And, of course, an ambassador needs his own personal diplomatic ship.
He smiled.
It needs a little hull work around the hatchway, but I think it'll do.
But I'm just a kid, Jack protested.
But you have the gifts of insight and compassion and justice,
said Braxton.
Yes,
Draco said.
You have an entirely noble character, Jack. Speaking on behalf of the Kada and Shantine, we would be honored to have you among us.
Then it's settled,
Braxton said, standing up.
Once the fleet's ready to move, we'll escort them to Iota Clestes. I've already alerted the nearest Universus depots, and they're putting together an initial supply run to help with the transition.
Thank you,
Draco said.
My pleasure,
Braxton replied, inclining his head.
I'm very much looking forward to working with you and your people.
He crossed back to the door.
As soon as you're all ready, come on over to the Advocatus Diabli. I've decided to stay aboard for the trip to Iota Clestes.
His face tightened a little.
And to make sure that death weapon is well and truly destroyed.
I would be happy to assist in that,
Dracos offered grimly.
I was hoping you would,
Braxton said.
See you all soon.
He left, his footsteps retreating again down the corridor. Well, Allison said, what do you think of that? I don't know yet, Jack said. This is all coming way too fast. You've got time, Allison said quietly. The point is that you're finally safe. You're safe and you're among friends, just like Dracos and his people are.
Wait, you're safe, Jack lad?
Jack frowned at the computer module. It had been Uncle Verge's voice, but there'd been something odd about it. Yes, I think maybe I really am, he said. Who'd ever have guessed, huh?
The people responsible for your parents' murder are dead.
Dead or in custody, Jack said. Why?
Just a minute, yeah?
There was a long pause. What's going on? Allison asked. Jack shook his head. I don't know. There was a click from the speaker.
Hello, Jack lad,
Uncle Verge said. Jack tensed. Because it wasn't Uncle Verge, the personality Jack's uncle had programmed into the SNA's computer. This voice was subtly, but very definitely different. It was Uncle Virgil himself.
I apologize for speaking to you through this recording,
Uncle Virg went on.
I presume from the fact that you are listening to it that it means I'm dead or in jail or otherwise unavailable to give all this to you in person. But I wanted you to know how it was you ended up living with me aboard your parents' ship, see?
Silently, Dracos got to his feet and crossed the room to stand at Jack's side.
It was their ship, if you haven't already figured that out, A beautiful Judge Paladin ship loaded to the intakes with all the finest equipment money can buy, see? Unfortunately, not all of us have that kind of money. So, seeing as I was a thief by profession, I set out to steal it,
Jack glanced at Allison. She was staring at the speaker, an intense look on her face.
Not that I specifically targeted your parents' ship, see? That was just, I don't know, luck? Fate? I don't know. I can never tell about these things. I just needed one of the ships to put down at some out-of-the-way place where the alarms would take a while to get out. The Heenworth Canyon on Shemaline was the perfect spot.
Jack looked down at Dracos. All that time they'd spent in that canyon, all that danger, and he'd never even known its real name.
I knew the Golvans had requested a Judge Paladin to come mediate their dispute with Troist Mining, so I got there first and arranged to have myself arrested. Nothing serious, just some minor theft that would give me an excuse to hang around the valley, see? Once your parents arrived and settled down to business, I slipped out of custody and got over to their ship, I had just popped my way through the lock when the Lesser Assembly Hall blew up.
Jack closed his eyes. The image of that explosion.
I didn't have time to think, Uncle Virgil went on. My first instinct was to get out and get out fast, see? I got to the cockpit, froze out the computer that was trying to block me, and took off,
Must have been fewer guy wires linking the pillars back then,
Dracos murmured.
Otherwise, the SNA could never have landed in the canyon.
I figured that whoever had the chutzpah to kill a pair of Judge Paladins would have been smart enough to have some air backup ready. But he missed out on that one. I got into space and on Echo before the Planetary Space Control even realized anything was wrong, see? It was only then that I found out I had a passenger, You. That was quite a shock, I'm sure you can imagine, You were in your bunk, sleeping like a, I suppose like a 3-year-old, A remote sitting beside you, see?
A remote?
Dracos asked. It's an electromechanical robot linked to the ship's computer, Jack said. I'd forgotten all about that.
Not entirely, Dracos said. Do you remember when we stumbled into the Wistwaki bonding ceremony on the Vagran colony?
Jack nodded. That had been right after he and Dracos had met, while Jack was still trying to get out from under the theft charge Neverland had framed him with. I called you my electromechanical assistant.
The remote had stopped when I froze out the computer,
Uncle Virgil continued.
I got rid of it right away, see? Hate the things. Then you woke up and, again, there wasn't time to think, I got you something to eat and spun you a story about your parents asking me to watch you for a while, see? I figured I'd drop you off with the authorities on the next planet, Only before we got to the next planet, I finally did have time to think. I didn't know why whoever it was had killed your parents, but it occurred to me that if it was personal rather than business, he might not want their son to live either, so I decided to hang on to you until I had a better handle on what was going on, see? But that was going to take some time, and meanwhile, you were starting to ask questions. You know the rest. I told you I was your Uncle Virgil and that your parents had been killed in a mine accident, and I sort of, adopted you,
And turned me into a thief, Jack murmured.
I know you're probably not happy with some of the things I did,
Uncle Virg said, an odd note of pleading in his voice.
Changing your name and, teaching you something in my profession, see? But you have to remember that I didn't know who or what we were up against, I had to keep your real identity hidden from everyone, including you, see?
At the same time, I needed to give you the tools you'd need if I didn't solve the puzzle and you had to track down the murderers yourself, yeah? But you're safe now, see? Somehow, you're safe. Otherwise, the computer wouldn't have been able to find and unlock this recording, see? You don't need me anymore. And for that, I'm glad. I really am. So, I guess this is goodbye, Jack lad. Now, I know you'll probably hate me for what I did to you. I wish I could have done better, yeah, but it's too late for that now. Just please try to believe that I did the best I knew how, yeah? The voice stopped. Jack took a deep breath, let it out in a slow sigh. So, he said, just to fill up the silence.
Do you hate him?
Tanim asked quietly. Jack looked at her. No, he said, and was rather surprised to discover that he meant it. He made mistakes, and we all do, but he kept me alive for 11 years. He considered, and I guess he really did give me the tools I needed to bring Neverland down. He looked back at the computer module. Thanks, Uncle Verge. There was no answer. Uncle Verge? Jack called again. Good afternoon, a courteous female voice said. How may I assist you? Jack swallowed. Never mind, he said. I'm sorry, Jack, Allison said gently. Jack blinked back sudden tears. Don't be, he said. Uncle Virgil died a long time ago. He looked at Dracos. And he was right. I don't need him anymore. He took another deep breath. So what are we hanging around here for anyway? He said, forcing some cheerfulness into his voice. Let's get over to the Advocatus Diabli and wreck a death weapon. And after that, we can introduce Tanim to her people.
Will you stay with me a while, Allison?
Tanim asked, almost shyly. As long as you need me, Allison promised. I'm looking forward to meeting your people, too. She picked up the carry bag and looked at Jack. You ready? Go ahead, Jack told her. I'll be along in a minute. Allison glanced at Dracos, then nodded. Okay, she said, but make it snappy. With Tanim padding along behind her, she left the room.
Are you all right?
Dracos asked gently. I don't know, Jack said. Suddenly, to his surprise and embarrassment, more tears were flowing from his eyes. I just feel sort of lost.
That's to be expected, Dracos said. For the past 6 months, you've been on the run, living with fear and danger and a burden no one your age should ever have to carry. Along the way, you've grown a great deal as a person, as well as learned things about yourself and your history you thought you'd never know.
He reached up a paw and rested it gently on Jack's arm.
You've never had a chance to truly grieve for your parents. Now, finally, you have that chance.
I guess, Jack said, swiping a hand across his eyes. But it hasn't just been the last 6 months. With Uncle Virgil, and then after he died... He shook his head. That was my life, Dracos. It was all I ever knew. Now suddenly, everything's changed.
Yes, it has, Dracos said. It's called being at peace, being at rest. It's something you haven't experienced since you were 3 years old.
He lashed his tail gently.
To tell you the truth, it's something I've never truly experienced either.
Jack looked down at the Kadal, a wave of tangled thoughts and emotions swirling through him. There was grief for his parents, certainly, along with the scary sense that his life had changed forever. But there was also a little shame that he was even carrying on like this when Dracos and his people had suffered so much more than he had. But on top of all the rest of it, we did it, he murmured. the facts suddenly and truly sinking in. We saved your people. We actually did it.
We did, didn't we?
Draco said, his jaws cracking open in a Kadaz smile.
You and I, and Allison and Taneem.
And Langston and Mr. Braxton, Jack added. He felt his stomach tighten. And Harper.
All of us together,
Dracos agreed quietly.
We're safe, Jack. You're safe.
Safe. The word flowed through Jack's mind like a gentle summer breeze. Safe. Hey in there! Allison's voice drifted back down the corridor. You two get lost? Quickly, Jack wiped the last of the tears from his eyes with his sleeve. Keep your socks on, he called back. We're coming. Then do it, Allison said as she and Taneem stuck their heads around the doorway into the room. Grandfather's waiting, and you don't want him mad at you. All right, Jack said dryly. What's he going to do? Take away the dessert cart? Worse, Allison said solemnly. He might limit you to a single day at the Great Galaxy Romp next time he takes us there, and no roller coasters at all. Actually, no roller coasters would be fine with me, Jack assured her. He gave Dracos a lopsided grin. I'm at peace now, you know. Not for long, Allison warned. You're an ambassador to a whole race of people. Well, two whole races, actually. Your future's about to get really complicated again.
Complicated, but good,
Dracos said.
For all of us.
Absolutely, Allison agreed, reaching down to stroke Taneem's neck. You really think so? Jack asked. Oh, yes, Allison smiled. Bet on it.
Thus ends Book 6 of the Dragonback Series by Timothy Zahn. Thank you for joining us as we followed Jack and Dracos and their friends on their amazing adventure to save Dracos' people. Please check out some of the other books and series that we've done audio recordings of previously. Catch you next time.